Your sister is twice the woman you'll ever be. Jessica. My mother's voice cut through the warm chatter of Thanksgiving dinner like a knife through butter. 23 relatives turned their heads in my direction, forks pausing mid-bite, as if watching a train wreck unfold in slow motion. I set down my wineglass with deliberate calm, my hands steady despite the familiar sting of humiliation washing over me. The golden turkey at the center of the table seemed to mock me with its perfect presentation, just like everything else in this house always appeared flawless on the surface. Wonderful, I replied, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Then she can give back the $80,000 I spent on her wedding. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Uncle Frank, who never stopped talking about his golf game, sat frozen with his mouth half open. My father nearly choked on his cranberry sauce, coughing violently while my mother's face drained of all color. My sister Rachel looked like she'd seen a ghost. My name is Jessica. I'm 29 years old and I work as a procurement manager for Silverstone Publishing in Seattle, Washington. I've spent the last 8 years climbing the corporate ladder at one of the most respected publishing houses on the West Coast, negotiating million-dollar deals with suppliers and managing budgets that could fund small towns. Yet somehow, in my mother's eyes, I've never measured up to my younger sister Rachel, the eternal golden child who could do no wrong. Growing up, I was the responsible one. While Rachel spent her teenage years sneaking out to parties and dating boys our parents disapproved of, I was buried in textbooks, earning straight A's and working part-time jobs to save for college. When Rachel dropped out of community college after one semester to pursue her dream of becoming an influencer, I was graduating summa cum laude with a business degree and landing my first corporate job. But none of that mattered to my parents. Rachel was beautiful, charming, and vivacious. She had that effortless way of lighting up a room that everyone seemed to adore. I was the practical one, the boring one, the daughter who sent birthday cards on time and remembered anniversaries, but somehow never sparked the same pride in my mother's eyes. The pattern had been set in stone for years. Rachel would make impulsive decisions, create chaos, and somehow emerge as the victim who needed rescuing. I would be the one expected to clean up the mess, usually with my wallet. My parents never asked directly, but the hints were always there. Rachel was struggling. Rachel needed help. Surely Jessica could spare a little assistance for family. And like a fool, I always did. 6 months ago, when Rachel announced her engagement to Marcus, a wannabe musician who'd never held a steady job in his life, I should have seen what was coming. The way my mother's eyes lit up as she started planning the wedding of the century. The way she casually mentioned the venue costs, the photographer prices, the catering expenses. The way she sighed dramatically about how tight money was since my father's accounting practice had lost 2 major clients. I should have walked away then. I should have said no when the requests started rolling in. But family was family. And somehow I found myself writing check after check, telling myself it was an investment in Rachel's happiness. The venue deposit, the dress alterations, the flowers, the photographer, the honeymoon suite in Maui. $80,000 later, I realized I'd been played. Now sitting at this Thanksgiving table, surrounded by my extended family, listening to my mother once again sing Rachel's praises while diminishing my achievements, something inside me finally snapped. The words had tumbled out before I could stop them, and there was no taking them back. The truth was finally on the table, served alongside the sweet potatoes and stuffing. The aftermath of my announcement spread through the dining room like spilled wine on white linen. Aunt Margaret dropped her fork with a clatter. My cousin Daniel's wife grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with shock. My grandmother, bless her heart, was the first to break the silence. $80,000, she whispered, her weathered hand clutching her chest. Sweet Lord, Jessica. My mother recovered first, her face flushing red as she attempted damage control. Jessica, this is neither the time nor the place for such discussions. We have guests. Funny, I said, taking a slow sip of my wine. It seemed like the perfect time when you were telling these same guests how inadequate I am compared to my sister. Rachel finally found her voice, though it came out as more of a squeak. Jessica, you're being dramatic. You offered to help with the wedding. No one forced you. Offered? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me refresh your memory. It started with Mom calling me in tears because you two couldn't afford the venue you'd already put a deposit on. Then it was the dress emergency when you decided the first one wasn't special enough. Then the photographer cancellation crisis. Then the flower shortage panic. Should I continue? My father set down his glass of wine, his face grave. Now hold on, Jessica. Your mother and I never asked you to spend that kind of money. You didn't have to ask directly, Dad. You just painted the picture perfectly. Poor Rachel's dream wedding was falling apart. The family reputation was at stake. And who else could possibly save the day but reliable Jessica, with her steady job and no husband or children to spend money on? The last part stung as I said it, but it was the truth. At 29, I was the only unmarried child in my extended family. My success at work had come at the cost of personal relationships. While my peers were getting married and starting families, I was working 60-hour weeks and traveling for business. My mother never let me forget that particular failing. I remember you being excited about helping, Rachel said, her voice defensive. You said you wanted to contribute to making my day special. I was excited, I admitted, because I thought I was helping my sister create beautiful memories. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the thing that brought our family closer together. I thought you'd appreciate the sacrifice I was making. Sacrifice? My mother's voice rose an octave. You make it sound like we held a gun to your head. You didn't need a gun, Mom. You had something much more effective. You had guilt, manipulation, and the promise that someday my contribution would be acknowledged and appreciated. Instead, 6 months later, I'm sitting here being told I'm half the woman my sister is. The weight of 8 years of accumulated resentment was pouring out of me now, and I couldn't stop it. Every birthday where Rachel's gifts were praised while mine were overlooked. Every holiday where her latest boyfriend was welcomed with open arms while my work achievements were dismissed as boring. Every family gathering where she was the star while I was the reliable wallflower. Rachel's been through a lot, my mother said, her voice taking on that familiar protective tone. The wedding stress, adjusting to married life, Marcus's music career struggles. She needs our support. And what about what I've been through? I asked. The 70-hour work weeks to afford your definition of family support. The sacrificed vacations, the depleted savings account, the sleepless nights wondering if I'll have enough left to buy my own house someday. My Aunt Margaret cleared her throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should change the subject. This is family business. No, I said firmly. This became everyone's business the moment Mom decided to use our family dinner as a platform to publicly humiliate me. If she wants to air family dynamics in front of everyone, then everyone gets to hear the whole story. Rachel's husband, Marcus, who'd been silent throughout the entire exchange, finally spoke up. Look, we never asked for that much money. Things just kept coming up. Things kept coming up because you two had champagne tastes on a beer budget, I replied. And instead of scaling back or waiting until you could afford the wedding you wanted, you let me bankroll your fairy tale. The tension in the room was suffocating. My cousin Jennifer tried to break it by asking if anyone wanted more wine, but her voice sounded strained and false. The magnificent feast my mother had spent days preparing sat cooling on the table, forgotten in the wake of my revelation. I think there's been a misunderstanding, my father said carefully, his accountant's mind probably calculating the exact figure I'd mentioned. 80,000 seems excessive for a wedding. Would you like to see the receipts, Dad? I pulled out my phone, my fingers already swiping to the folder where I'd meticulously documented every expense. $25,000 for the venue, $12,000 for catering upgrades, because the basic package wasn't good enough. $8,000 for the photographer Rachel insisted on after she fired the first one. $5,000 for flowers when she decided roses weren't exotic enough. $4,000 for her dress alterations and veil. $3,000 for the honeymoon suite upgrade. And that's just the big-ticket items. With each number I recited, Rachel seemed to shrink further into her chair. Marcus had gone completely silent, probably realizing for the first time exactly how much money his wife's family had contributed to their lifestyle. The wedding cost $60,000, my mother protested weakly. You can't possibly have paid $80,000. You're forgetting the honeymoon expenses, I said. The flights to Maui, the resort upgrades, the excursions, the shopping money. And then there were the engagement party costs, the bridal shower expenses, and the various wedding-related emergencies that kept cropping up. My grandmother shook her head slowly. In my day, people got married at the courthouse and had cake at their mother's house. All this extravagance is just foolishness. Grandma's right, I said, but I was foolish enough to enable it because I thought it mattered to my family. I thought contributing to Rachel's happiness would mean something. I thought maybe if I proved how much I cared, how much I was willing to sacrifice, I'd finally earn the same love and respect she gets just for existing. The words hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. This was the heart of it, the wound I'd been carrying for 29 years, the constant feeling that no matter what I achieved, no matter how responsible or successful I became, I would always be the consolation prize daughter. That's not fair, Rachel said, tears forming in her eyes. I never asked you to compete with me. You didn't have to ask, I replied. The competition was built into our family structure from day one. Perfect Rachel, who could do no wrong, and practical Jessica, who existed to clean up the messes. My mother's jaw tightened. I love both my daughters equally. Do you? I challenged. Because your actions say otherwise. When was the last time you bragged about my promotion to your friends? When was the last time you asked about my life without immediately segueing into Rachel's latest drama? When was the last time you defended me the way you just defended her? The silence that followed was answer enough. Around the table, my relatives were studying their plates, their hands, anything but the family implosion happening before their eyes. I think you're being unfair, my mother said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm being honest, I corrected. Maybe for the first time in years. And honesty feels unfair when you've been living in a carefully constructed fantasy. Marcus suddenly pushed back from the table. I think we should go. Sit down, Marcus, Rachel snapped, the first real fire I'd seen from her all evening. This is my family. A family that's airing very private financial business in front of everyone, he replied, his discomfort obvious. Private financial business that became public the moment my contribution was erased from the narrative, I said. You want to leave? Fine, but you're not taking the moral high ground with you. My father rubbed his temples, looking every one of his 62 years. How did we get here? This was supposed to be a nice family dinner. We got here because someone decided to use this nice family dinner as an opportunity to publicly diminish one daughter while elevating the other, I said. We got here because I finally reached my limit of being treated like a second-class family member despite being the one who consistently shows up, contributes, and sacrifices. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Thank you for dinner, Mom. It was truly enlightening. Where are you going? Rachel asked, panic creeping into her voice. Home. I suddenly don't have much of an appetite. Jessica, don't be dramatic, my mother called after me as I headed toward the coat closet. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. I turned back to face the table where 23 pairs of eyes were watching me like I was a wild animal that might attack at any moment. Out of proportion? Let me tell you what's out of proportion. It's expecting your daughter to fund her sister's wedding and then publicly humiliating her 6 months later. It's taking $80,000 from someone and never once acknowledging the sacrifice they made. It's spending 29 years making someone feel like they're not good enough while simultaneously expecting them to bankroll the family's happiness. Marcus had gone pale. $80,000 is a lot of money, he said quietly. Thank you, Marcus. I'm glad someone finally acknowledges that fact. We didn't know it was that much, he continued, shooting a confused look at Rachel. You told me your parents were helping with the wedding. Rachel's face flushed crimson. They were helping. Jessica is family. It's the same thing. No, it's not the same thing, I said firmly. When parents help with a wedding, it's a gift from one generation to the next. When a sister empties her savings account, it's a loan that apparently no one intends to acknowledge, let alone repay. We never said we wouldn't pay you back, Rachel protested. You never said you would either. In fact, in 6 months, the subject has never come up once. Not when you posted pictures of your new furniture. Not when you went on that weekend trip to Napa last month. Not when Marcus bought that expensive guitar 2 weeks ago. Marcus's mouth fell open. That guitar cost $3,000. If we owed Jessica $80,000, maybe I should have waited. You think? I said sarcastically. But don't worry, Marcus. According to my mother, your wife is twice the woman I'll ever be, so I'm sure she'll figure out how to make this right. My grandmother cleared her throat. Jessica, dear, come sit back down. Let's talk about this properly. Grandma, I love you, but there's nothing left to talk about. I've spent 8 years of my adult life being the family ATM while being treated like the family disappointment. I'm done. You're not a disappointment, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing, Dad? When was the last time you asked about my work without immediately changing the subject? When was the last time either of you visited my apartment or showed any interest in my life that didn't involve what I could contribute to this family financially? The questions hung in the air unanswered because we all knew the truth. My parents' relationship with me had become transactional somewhere along the way. I was the reliable daughter who could be counted on to solve problems with her checkbook. But I wasn't the daughter they bragged about or prioritized emotionally. I walked out into the cool November evening, leaving behind 23 stunned relatives and the wreckage of a family dinner that would be talked about for years to come. 3 weeks later, I was still replaying that Thanksgiving dinner conversation in my mind when my phone rang at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Rachel's name flashed on the screen, and I debated letting it go to voicemail. We hadn't spoken since I'd walked out of my parents' house, and I wasn't particularly eager to break that streak. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered on the 4th ring. Jessica. Rachel's voice sounded small and shaky. I need to talk to you. If this is about an apology for Thanksgiving, you're about 3 weeks late. If it's about money, the answer is no. It's not about money. Well, not exactly. Can you meet me somewhere, please? It's important. Something in her tone made me pause. Rachel sounded genuinely distressed, not just her usual dramatic flair when things weren't going her way. What's wrong? I can't talk about it over the phone. Please, Jessica? I know you're angry with me, but I really need my sister right now. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. When I arrived, I found Rachel already there, hunched over a lukewarm cup of coffee with dark circles under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. You look terrible, I said, sliding into the seat across from her. Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear. What's going on, Rachel? And please don't tell me you and Marcus need money for couples counseling or something. Marcus left me. The words hit me like a physical blow. Whatever I'd been expecting, it wasn't that. What? When? 2 days ago. He packed a bag and moved in with his bandmate Derek. He said he needed space to figure things out. I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of manipulation or exaggeration, but all I saw was genuine pain. What happened? The money thing really messed with his head. After Thanksgiving, he kept asking questions about our finances, about how much you'd actually paid for things. He started going through our wedding expenses, adding everything up. And he realized that almost everything about our wedding was funded by you. The venue, the food, the flowers, the photographer, everything that made it special. He said it made him feel like our whole marriage was built on a lie. I felt a flicker of sympathy for Marcus, which surprised me. It wasn't a lie, Rachel. You two love each other, do we? Because apparently, while I was telling Marcus that Mom and Dad were helping with wedding costs, he was assuming they could afford to be generous because Dad's business was doing well. When he found out the truth, that you'd emptied your savings account for us, he felt like I'd deceived him. You did deceive him. I didn't mean to. I just didn't want him to feel bad about accepting help. I thought once we were married, it wouldn't matter where the money came from. I sipped my coffee, processing this information. So Marcus left because he found out I paid for your wedding? He left because he said he doesn't know who I really am. He said if I could lie about something that big, What else was I lying about? He started questioning everything about our relationship. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus had left Rachel for the same reason I'd exploded at Thanksgiving, just from the opposite direction. We'd both realized we'd been living with a version of my sister that wasn't entirely real. "I'm sorry this happened," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want to see Rachel's marriage fall apart. Are you? Because part of me thinks you're happy about this. You get to be right about Marcus not being good enough, about us being irresponsible. I never said Marcus wasn't good enough. I said you two weren't ready to get married if you couldn't afford your own wedding. Same thing. No, it's not. And no, I'm not happy about your marriage falling apart. I'm sad for you, but I'm not surprised that lies eventually have consequences. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Did you know this would happen when you brought up the money at Thanksgiving? Did you know it would destroy my marriage? I considered the question carefully. I knew Marcus would eventually find out the truth about who paid for what. I thought he already knew. Most couples discuss their finances before getting married. That's not what I asked. No, Rachel, I didn't set out to destroy your marriage. I was angry about being humiliated in front of our entire family, and I reacted emotionally. But I'm not sorry the truth came out. Secrets like that have a way of poisoning relationships anyway. So what am I supposed to do now? You're supposed to figure out how to be honest with your husband and rebuild trust. You're supposed to take responsibility for the choices you made instead of expecting other people to fix them for you. I can't afford the apartment without Marcus's income. And there it was, the real reason for this coffee shop meeting. Despite her claims that this wasn't about money, everything always came back to money with my family. I'm not giving you money for rent, Rachel. I didn't ask for that. You didn't have to. But the answer is still no. Then what am I supposed to do? Move back in with mom and dad? You're 26 years old with a college degree. You're supposed to get a job and support yourself like most adults do. I have a job. I work at the boutique. 20 hours a week selling overpriced jewelry to tourists is not a job. It's a hobby. You need a real career with real income and real financial independence. Rachel stared into her coffee cup. Marcus said the same thing. He said I act like a child who expects other people to take care of me. Marcus isn't wrong? You really think I'm that pathetic? I looked at my sister, really looked at her. And for the first time in years, I saw past the golden child facade to the insecure woman underneath. I think you're smart and capable, but you've been enabled your entire life to avoid taking responsibility for yourself. I think you could be amazing if you stopped expecting other people to solve your problems. And I think you've been jealous of me your entire life, and you're enjoying watching me fail. The accusation stung because there was a grain of truth in it. Not the enjoying her failure part, but the jealousy. I had been jealous of how easily everything seemed to come to Rachel. How effortlessly she captured everyone's attention and affection. Maybe I have been jealous, I admitted. But this isn't about revenge, Rachel. This is about consequences. You made choices, and now you're dealing with the results of those choices. With no help from my family. You've had plenty of help from your family. $80,000 worth, plus a lifetime of emotional support and preferential treatment. Maybe it's time you learn to help yourself. Rachel stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I should have known you'd be like this. Cold and practical, just like always. And you should work on being honest and responsible. Just like never, she walked away without another word, leaving me sitting alone with 2 half-empty coffee cups and the satisfaction of finally saying exactly what I'd been thinking for years. But as I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. 2 weeks after the coffee shop confrontation, my phone started ringing with increasing frequency. First, it was my mother, her voice carefully controlled as she explained that Rachel was going through a difficult time and maybe I could extend some sisterly support. Then it was my father, taking a more direct approach and asking if I could help Rachel with her rent. Just until she gets back on her feet. I said no to both of them. Then my Aunt Margaret called. Having heard through the family grapevine about Rachel's marital problems, She suggested that perhaps I was being a bit harsh and that families should stick together during difficult times. My cousin Daniel's wife sent a carefully worded text about how relationships were more important than money. Said no to all of them, but it was my grandmother's call that nearly broke my resolve. "Jessica, dear," she said in her gentle voice that had soothed countless childhood hurts. "I know you're upset with your sister, but she's really struggling. She's lost weight. She looks terrible. And she's talking about moving back home. Your parents are beside themselves. Grandma, I love you. But this isn't my problem to solve. She's your sister. She's my adult sister who needs to learn how to take care of herself. Don't you think you're being a little hard on her? She made some mistakes, but haven't we all?" It was emotional manipulation wrapped in genuine concern. And it almost worked. Almost. "Grandma, would you respect me less if I told you I was tired of being the family's financial safety net?" There was a long pause. "Oh, sweetheart. Is that what this is about?" "Partly. But it's also about the fact that every time Rachel faces consequences for her choices, someone in this family steps in to rescue her. How is she ever going to learn to be responsible if we keep enabling her irresponsibility?" "You sound very wise, dear. But sometimes wisdom feels awfully cold." After that call, I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I should help Rachel one more time. Maybe I was letting my resentment cloud my judgment. Then I got the call that changed everything. It was 8 p.m. on a Friday when Rachel's number flashed on my phone again. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Jessica. Her voice was different this time, not pleading or manipulative, but flat and tired. "What is it, Rachel?" "I need to tell you something about the wedding money." "What about it?" "Marcus and I went through all the receipts and bank statements. We've been trying to figure out exactly how much we owe you so we can start making payments." This was unexpected. "Okay. The thing is, we found some discrepancies. Some of the amounts don't match what you said at Thanksgiving." My stomach dropped. "What kind of discrepancies?" "The honeymoon expenses, for one. You said you paid for our flights and resort upgrades in Maui, but I have the credit card statements right here, and Marcus paid for those himself." $7,000 on his credit card. I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's not possible." "It is possible because I'm looking at the statements right now. Marcus has been paying the minimum balance on that debt for 6 months. We've also been paying for our own apartment this whole time, not you. And the engagement party expenses you mentioned? Mom and Dad paid for those." The room started spinning. "Rachel, I have receipts for everything. Do you? Because Marcus and I would really like to see them. We want to pay you back for what we actually owe, but we need to know the real number." My mind was racing. How could the amounts be wrong? I'd been so careful, so meticulous in tracking every expense. I'd been angry for months about the financial burden I'd carried for their wedding. And now Rachel was telling me half of those expenses hadn't actually been mine. "Can you email me the statements you're looking at?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Already done. Check your email." I put the call on speaker and opened my laptop, pulling up my email account. There were indeed several messages from Rachel with attached files, bank statements, credit card bills, receipts, all organized and labeled. As I opened the documents, a cold realization began to settle over me. Marcus had paid for significantly more of their wedding expenses than I'd realized. The honeymoon costs I'd been resentful about were entirely on his credit card. Several vendor payments I thought I'd made had actually come from my parents' account. "Rachel," I said slowly, "I need to check my own records. I think there might have been some confusion." "Confusion about what? About who paid for what?" "Give me a day to go through everything and get back to you." After we hung up, I spent the next 3 hours going through every receipt, every bank statement, every transaction record from the past year. What I found made me physically ill. The actual amount I'd contributed to Rachel's wedding was $32,000. Not $80,000, still a significant sum, but not the massive financial burden I'd been carrying in my mind for 6 months. The other expenses had been real, but my memory had somehow conflated them all into one giant debt I was owed. Marcus had handled more of the costs than anyone had given him credit for. My parents had contributed more than I'd remembered, and I had been nursing a resentment based on incomplete and inaccurate information. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I'd humiliated my sister in front of our entire family over numbers that were wrong. I'd destroyed her marriage by exposing financial details that weren't even accurate. I'd positioned myself as the long-suffering victim of family exploitation when the reality was far more complex. Sitting alone in my apartment at midnight, surrounded by financial documents and the wreckage of my righteous indignation, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. My anger had been justified, but my facts had been wrong. And in my rush to finally stand up for myself, I'd potentially destroyed my sister's life over a lie I'd been telling myself for months. The worst part was that I wasn't even sure how I'd gotten the numbers so wrong. Had I been so eager to feel victimized that I'd inflated my own contributions? Had my resentment been so deep that I'd unconsciously exaggerated the injustice to justify my anger? I needed to call Rachel back. I needed to apologize, to explain, to somehow fix what I'd broken. But first, I needed to figure out how I'd managed to convince myself that I'd given my sister $50,000 more than I actually had. Because if I could be that wrong about something so important, what else in my life had I been seeing through the distorted lens of my own resentment? The truth, as I discovered over the following weeks, was more complicated than a simple accounting error. My anger hadn't just inflated numbers. It had colored my entire perception of my family relationships. Yes, I had contributed $32,000 to Rachel's wedding, which was still substantial. But I'd also used that contribution as justification for years of accumulated resentment about being the responsible daughter. When I finally met with Rachel again to apologize, she surprised me with her own confession. She'd always felt the pressure of being the favorite, always worried that one mistake would shatter the image everyone had of her. We'd both been trapped in roles that neither of us had chosen. Marcus and Rachel eventually reconciled, but only after months of honest conversations about money, expectations, and building a life based on their own values rather than family pressure. They bought a modest starter home with their own savings and invited me to the housewarming party, a small gathering with homemade food and genuine smiles. My parents, to their credit, also began the hard work of examining their own behavior. My mother started therapy and made conscious efforts to show equal interest in both daughters' lives. My father instituted a new family policy: no more financial bailouts without clear terms and conditions discussed up front. As for me, I learned that being right about the principle didn't excuse being wrong about the facts. I learned that resentment, when left to fester, can distort reality as surely as any lie. And I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do for your family, and for yourself, is to insist on honesty. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when you might be wrong, even when it threatens to upend everything. That Thanksgiving dinner became a turning point for all of us. Not because I had all the answers, but because I finally asked the questions that needed asking. Who are we to each other? What do we really owe one another? And what does it mean to love someone without enabling their dependence or losing yourself in the process? The answers, I'm still learning, are never as simple as a number on a bank statement.